Good morning. I always sound like a TV show host.
Good morning.
Good morning. Oh, it's a radio host. Today we're going to be talking about Dave's van hobby. We have covered a bit of this topic before. He's going to go into a little more detail about the tools it uses, on kind of how much space it takes and why he chose this van hobby. Before we get to that, I want to let you know that today, February 6th, on our website, carryonvagabond.com, we will have spoons for sale live at 1 p.m. Eastern time. So again, that's February 6th, 1 p.m. Eastern time. Spoons will be going live on our website. Without further ado, I'll let Dave take it away.
I get a lot of questions whenever we post a video that has a little bit of me carving in it. I get a lot of questions about everything from what tools I use, how do I do it, that sort of thing. So I'll try to cover some of that today. I got into this hobby maybe 2 years ago, quite by accident. We've been in the van full time for over 5 years now, and I used to do a lot of things, a lot of knife making, woodwork, and I was really missing that creative outlet a couple years ago, and I stumbled across a video on someone carving wooden spoons with just a couple hand tools. And no sandpaper, no power tools, nothing. And I thought that looks kind of cool. So that's how I fell into it. And it is a very simple, and simple I mean by just, it doesn't take a lot of things to do it. I carve everything with an axe and 2 knives. And I use this small Japanese pull saw for part of the process sometimes, and I'll show you that. But this is really all you need. It doesn't take a lot of things. It does require sharpening, and you can be really simple with that. I use wet dry sandpaper to sharpen knives. And the first thing that I have to do is I have to acquire some wood, and the best thing to carve is green wood. That's pretty much most spoon carvers do, is they acquire green wood. When it's green, it's got the moisture in it, makes it easy to carve. This is a piece of cherry, and because it's green, it's heavy. But it's a hard wood when it's dry. But when it's wet like this, it carves easy. So you carve it into like a rough shape. This is a rough carve to, it's near finished completion, and then you let this dry. Usually it takes a day, maybe 2 days. Sometimes I set them around for a couple months, and they hang out in drawers until I get to finish them. But once they're dry, then you take your razor sharp knives and you do your finish cuts on them, and it's as smooth, if not smoother than sanding. And if you ever notice a wooden spoon when you're using it, when it's wet, it gets kind of fuzzy over time. That's mainly because they've been sanded, and sanding tears the grain in the wood, and even real fine sandpaper, whereas carving, it just slices the grain smooth, and then it leaves a really beautiful finish, and I'll show you some of those. So once you have the wood, the 3 tools I use is a carving axe, which you can just go to like a hardware store and get something simple, but the key is to get the proper edge. It's a flat edge, 1 bevel. A lot of knives will have like a pocket knife, you have the bevel and then the secondary bevel at the end. This doesn't have that. It's called a Scandi grind. It's just a flat bevel across the whole side, and it's about a 28-degree bevel. And so this one I saved my pennies and had. This was hand forged in the Ukraine out of ball bearing steel, and it's very sharp, and it stays that way. Axing through lots of wood, it still stays very sharp. This is the axe I started with. It's a Grand Force Brooks. I think we have it on our website. It's not really a carving knife. You'll see how short this is. It doesn't have a sweep whip to here for that carving, slicing action, but it worked amazing for my first 1.5 years of carving. I still use it. I just used a file and got this edge to about 28 degrees, and then I sharpened it on my sandpaper, and it still works great. I use it all the time. But sometimes when you get into a hobby, eventually you're going to want to get some nicer tools, so I splurged and got this carving axe. The knives, Mora knives made in Sweden are the most common spoon carving knives. They're fairly inexpensive and they work perfect for me, and anyone that's ever used them will say they're definitely the best starting knife. They're designed for carving the way the bevel is shaped. I think this is on Amazon like 30 bucks. The other tool that you use for the bowl is a hook knife, and this is the Mora 106, and this is the Mora 164, and it's less than 40 bucks on Amazon, and it's used for, you know, carving out the bowl of the spoon. This is a Japanese pull saw. It's handy for a lot of things around in the van, but it works amazing for part of the process when you're axing out the spoon, and I'll show you that in a minute. One of the options, not necessary, is the Silky Big Boy. The Silky Big Boy. I like saying that. But this beast is a two-handed Japanese pull saw, and when you stumble across some green mesquite wood in the desert, or you know, a cherry log somewhere, this makes very fast work of it, and it's handy for pretty much everything else, you know, camp life. So I think we have all these on our website, and I think we'll put them in the description. But that's the tools I use. But then the tricky part, actually for me, it was harder to learn to sharpen them and maintain their sharpness than it was to learn to carve a spoon. So what I use is wet dry paper. It's basically adhesive, different levels of wet dry paper on these acrylic pieces, and you can switch from different grits back and forth all the way up to your stropping leather. So I sharpen my knives usually up to 5,000 grit on wet dry paper, and then the key is the stropping. The leather strop is probably the most important tool for spoon carving. Once you get your knife to where it's, you know, hair shaving sharp, you use leather strop, and every 20-30 minutes you restrop it. You don't have to go back to the sandpaper for a long time. So learning how to strop with leather strop with a polishing compound is the most important part of spoon carving. To be, it's no fun with dull tools, and it's also dangerous. Another piece of the sharpening system I use is obviously I have to sharpen the hook knife. The hook knife is the big challenge to learn to use and to learn to sharpen. So the sharpening system for that is the same wet dry paper on a hard dowel, and you know, you just sharpen just the inside, and then a piece of leather on a dowel, and you strop the inside. It would be an entire video on sharpening each individual type of knife or the axe. I'm just trying to give you an overview of everything that we do here. Sharpening is the key. It makes the hobby much more enjoyable if you have really sharp tools. It does take some practice to learn proper carving techniques to maintain safety, because obviously this can be dangerous business. I've cut myself a number of times. You'll get to where the techniques keep you from being cut. I still cut myself from time to time, but it's usually because I'm moving a knife around, and I think maybe that's why I like it, is I'm so focused when I'm doing it that, I mean, an hour or two can go by and it feels like 15 minutes to me. So that's the final stages for this part. I rough it out, leave it kind of thick, let it dry slow. Sometimes the fridge works good for that. They can crack if they dry too fast. And then after a few days, I'll come back and I'll carve it to the final shape and size, and I will finish it with hemp oil. Hemp oil works really well. Hemp oil or flaxseed oil, which is linseed. Some people use walnut oil. But all those oils they dry, so it dries and seals the wood. Some people don't do anything to the wood, they just let it age naturally, and whatever your thing. But these are cherry. This is some apple scoops that I've done. I love funky wood like this. Makes for cool scoops. I know some of the techniques I use might look kind of scary, like when you're carving, like when I'm carving the spoon this way, it looks scary, but your arm, you always keep the knife a certain way. But I'm not an instructor. Don't do what I do. Find an expert to learn from. This is just what I do. It's a dangerous hobby, so learn how to do it. Be careful. Hopefully this answered some questions. It probably created a bunch more. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and yeah, carry on.